Today it might be interesting to talk about something that might help a lot of people to get clarity about personal productivity versus business productivity. And there was a member, John, he reached out via DM and he had a specific question. The different setup in Heptabase for BKM versus PKM, so business knowledge management versus personal knowledge management. He further says, then I know ClickUp is more used for BKM topics, business knowledge management, but I would like to see how to better organize my PKM, personal knowledge management topics, towards a BKM foundation before finalizing into ClickUp. And the second one was how you fully approach and differentiate between PKM and BKM. I think we can talk even longer than 30 minutes about this topic, but I think it's a perfect use case because he already mentioned himself something, maybe aware or not aware, but that's something why we differentiate between these two parts, especially also on the ICOR framework. When you think about the tools that you are using, we have two different areas on the ICOR framework, the PKM and the BKM area, and we have to think about both areas, what tools we use there. And one reason is that to understand the differences, that in the personal knowledge management area, it's all about your personal thoughts, about your personal conclusions, about your personal brainstorming. And I always bring up the example when you're in a meeting and you want to take some notes about somebody you don't like, or maybe you're the boss and you want to fire somebody, you probably don't want to place this into the BKM system and the business knowledge management for everybody to see. You might first make some notes. Maybe you accumulate these notes over several weeks until you draw a conclusion. And the conclusion goes then towards the BKM or to use in a different meeting and so on. And that's the big difference. It needs to be a secure space just for your own thoughts, versus the BKM is a place for everybody to access and leverage. And outsourcing this thought process to the PKM for each individual member as well, so everybody will have their own PKM. And you can consider paper notebooks also being PKMs used for hundreds of years. So people made their notes, they made their conclusions, and then they wrote the final piece of content, or they made the letter that they sent out and all this. And that's the same principles behind this. And I'm sure Paco can expand on this.
Yes, because it's important to understand when we create a specific tool that is not a software tool, it's just a tool to do something with it, and the ICOR framework is one of our tools. It's important to understand the concepts behind that tool and why we made it, because we didn't make it for the sake of it, just to say that we are cool guys who create tools for busy professionals. It's because they are really useful. And one of the main differentiations, talking about areas in the ICOR framework, is business versus personal. That's the two of the big areas inside the ICOR framework. And personal refers to the individual, to the busy professional himself, whereas the business area is related to the team. That doesn't mean that the personal area refers to information that refers to related to your personal life, because everything here in ICOR is related to work. The thing is that for pedagogical purposes, we decided to name business to the area related to the team. So whenever we see business in the ICOR framework, in that context, we need to understand that that's referring to the team. So if it's related to the information, as we say, BKM, business knowledge management, is all the information that we share with the team. That it can be a procedure and also global and general information about the business, like the VAT information, legal information, any information that needs to be shared with the team and that the team have access to it. And that it's completely the opposite of PKM. Personal knowledge management is that area where you store information based on privacy, information that you don't want to share with anyone but you, and that goes refer to any of this information, meeting notes that you take for personal use, any thought or idea. And I think that creates also a clear differentiation between the best tools possible for each use case, because normally, no matter that tools will always say that they serve for all purposes, there's a crucial differentiation, for instance, and we will talk about it right now. Heptabase and ClickUp. It's a total different approach to information with different purposes, and we will talk about it immediately.
Yeah. I just want to add here that what about the solopreneurs? What about the people who are the one-man business? Does it even matter then, the BKM? And yes, it does. I mean, it was for me when I launched the Paperless movement, I worked this way already, pretending that I'm working with a team. So I built up a BKM system. I used already project management tools and I laid out these things like I would work with a team before I scaled or got in people. The reason is that it sets the, well, first of all, you get the right mindset that you realize that you wear a lot more hats than you may think as a solopreneur. But you also realize the different parts of your business that you then can outsource or hire people for and are just replacing the work that you have done because you already streamlined the work. So if you're a solopreneur and you start out, in my case, I optimized the hell out of all my workflows. I automated a lot of things, and that saved me a lot of money in the starting of the side hustle. And also, as I had still my day job, 10 to 13 hours a day, I had to have these automations. There was no room for having team members and back and forth and all this thing. But the moment I started hiring, everything was there. I was just filling in the functions that I defined prior hiring, and they were taking over the business workflows that I have defined. And that's what we share in the Automation Like a Pro course in the ICOR journey. And also to answer the question from John about where to find the information about these different areas, that's where in the ICOR journey we have the different courses. So there's the PKM Like a Pro course that dives into the personal knowledge management, which is tied to the digital note-taking Like a Pro course. So capturing the information, knowing where to store things, and then manage the information. These two courses should be watched together. And then there is the project management Like a Pro course that is that goes about business project management and business knowledge management. It needs to be interconnected. The ICOR is where information meets action, and we have to save people time to find relevant information to get things done. So that's what a lot of time is wasted, is asking for information, searching for information, and all these things. And that's what we talk about in the project management Like a Pro course. And well, it goes far beyond where we have the team communication, the idea incubator, and a lot more. But all this is part of the BKM system. And that's why it's important. It's a complete different area of your productivity system. And this needs to be aware. And now let's talk about Heptabase and collaboration. I mean, that's something you see. I don't get it, right? Whenever I saw it, people complaining about, but I cannot collaborate with these tools. So for Obsidian, for years, people were asking to find a way to collaborate. When Obsidian launched, when was it, man? It's already 5 years ago or something.
2020, no, it was during the COVID crisis, I think, more or less, because it
Really?
was
I
when
thought
they
it was
started,
even
I
older.
think.
So, but it doesn't
No,
matter. So the moment this launched, I was also had this idea in mind. How amazing it would be if we could merge vaults and we can access other people's more vaults and we see the interconnections there. But you end up just with another internet and you start searching again for the information. That's one conclusion I came up. And the other thing is for Heptabase, where people were also asking for collaboration. And well, one thing is people asking for collaboration. The other thing is the venture capital they get, that the stakeholders usually push the tools to make a team plan or make some way of collaboration, because this means that this tool goes now to the B2B business from the C to B, and that's where the money is in, and that's why everybody is pushing towards this. Now you could call us out for launching the ICOR for Teams very soon too for the same purpose, but here it makes all the sense because we go from the individual person and then making everything aligned across the team working the same way. That's a different thing. But now let's talk about Heptabase in collaboration. I haven't even tested it yet. So there's the beta testing about this. And to be honest, I don't care so much. Obviously, we will cover it and we will have a look into this. So with the Heptabase Mastery course, there will be an update and things like that. However, I don't see it. And the thing is also for Tana back then, they already had collaboration there. And I remember I was in Spain visiting you, Paco, there. And we've been working on, what was it, man? It was one of the courses as well, talking about this. And we tried to use Tana in collaboration. It was a total mess because the problem here is to really understand the differences between your personal bubble and the public bubble and stay in control of the differentiation. And that's why we concluded that having two separate tools for these two different areas of knowledge is the most secure thing that you can do. But also, you are leveraging the tool's superpowers. One tool is best for personal knowledge management and deep thinking and evolving your knowledge base over time. And the other thing is for sharing information and interconnect information. And this is where we cannot see it, that people would start working together in a PKM system.
The point is that, again, concepts matter. Yeah. I don't know how many times do we say this. Sorry. Because the moment that we name as information to things that has nothing to do one to each other, it's the moment that obviously people get confused because it's just one term referring to multiple things, because the approach to information in the personal area has nothing to do with the approach to information, because when we are talking about business knowledge management on ClickUp, this is not to enhance my process of thinking. That's one of the main purposes of any personal knowledge management tool, a PKM tool like Heptabase or Tana or Obsidian or any other, Logseek. They enhance my process of thinking, okay? And that has nothing to do with the information that I share with my team referring to SOPs, a procedure, a comment that I put into a task, because all that, an idea of a new product, all that is just a single source of truth to store information that I want to share. That differs, for instance, of team collaboration tools like Miro, for instance, that help a team to think together because they have a whiteboard and they use visual thinking, and then that's also BKM. But you see the confusion, and all that is information because that has nothing to do with action. And that's why people get confused. So the moment that any tool, for instance, and we can analyze using Heptabase as a perfect tool for PKM, personal knowledge management, comparing to ClickUp, that it's a tool to share information with the team, a business knowledge management, but not enhancing the process of thinking itself. And the thing is that when Heptabase wants to go into the BKM area, well, they need to think. And right now, today, we have been using Miro to collaborate, and we have seen how they have implemented, for instance, a new object like a document. Beware of this, because this becomes really useful the moment that you are sharing your thinking process with the whole team, So how the heck is Heptabase going to compete to Miro? Well, I don't know. The point is that maybe Heptabase just grabs the essential features and make things simpler, as they did, because that's the approach of Heptabase. They took the best out of Notion, the best out of any other personal knowledge management tool based on text, like Obsidian or Logseek, because it has a little bit of outlining, and just a little bit of boards, but focus on personal knowledge management, of the thinking process of a person thinking isolated. And maybe that can be the same approach, but let's think about ClickUp promoting and encouraging the team to think together. I cannot see that, I cannot use whiteboards on ClickUp because that's not the approach of ClickUp to information. And the moment that we really understand the different types of information, what's the main goal of the knowledge management area compared to the business knowledge management area, we start understanding why we can use one tool for one purpose and another one for the thing. And that takes us to, again, understand that the moment that we use each tool for the right purpose, it's not confusing or chaotic to use two different tools. Because for me, the moment that I think about PKM and I have perfectly defined that process, I go directly to base. Imagine that I just bet on one tool, that it's ClickUp, and I need to force myself to use ClickUp to develop and enhance my thinking process. What the heck? That's when one tool for everything again becomes a mess, no? A mess and something that it will never work.
And that's a good point, because I just saw another comment on YouTube where somebody reached out and said, well, I'm using Tana, and I started using a bit of Heptabase, the two tools, and seeing you guys using 5 to 10 tools, that's far too complicated and too complex. I'm already struggling using these two tools. And that's something, it makes me really wonder how people are just focused on their PKM system. And that's where we have to educate that their productivity system consists of a lot more that probably everybody is using on a daily basis, but just not being aware of. Tana, Darcy in the comments here says as well, Tana is way too complicated for me. Great that you have the insight, so stop using it. Use something that works for you and just use just this one tool. I'm not using Tana anymore. I'm just using Heptabase, and I'm perfectly fine. And Paco is using both. It's perfectly fine for him. Why? Because he perfectly understands when he goes to what tool. And we always bring up the example with 1Password or LastPass or any password manager that you use out there. When you think about where do you find your password, you know that you only go there. You're probably not going to, well, maybe some of you go to a post-it on your monitor. You probably should stop doing this and start using a password manager. But you would not go into a PKM system, hopefully, to find the password there. You will have a dedicated password manager. So therefore, password, oh, I go to this tool. Boom. And this is a knowledge management system. It's the knowledge of your password. It's a specific type of information that you're managing in a password manager. When I think about the video recordings that I have to edit the videos and publish to YouTube, I go to Dropbox, and in Dropbox there's the structure. It's linked out. Well, that's a whole other topic, how it gets interconnected with the BKM, but it's also a knowledge management on its own, file-based knowledge management, right? So I would never go to Heptabase in order to search for my recording files. And the moment when you question which tool you need to open up in order to find the information that you're looking for, that should give you the indication that you're using tools in parallel that have overlapping purposes. Probably you saw one tool being, talked about on YouTube. You started using it a bit, and that's when I read something like, and I've started to use a bit of Heptabase. That shows immediately that there are no tool agnostic workflows behind. Either you understand why you're using the tool and you bring in your workflows and start using the tool the same way you would use other tools, or you don't. There's no, I'm using a bit of this and a bit of this. This leads to scattered information and a messy knowledge management system in the back end. And that's where we are never scared when people say, well, now you're talking only about Heptabase, for example. Maybe it might be another tool coming around the corner next year, and I move on. And Paco maybe too, maybe not, who knows? Maybe he stays completely in Tana. The thing is, if we move on, we just move on with our tool agnostic concept and workflows. That's how we approach any new tool, to see if the tool will enhance the efficiency of these concepts and workflows inside the PKM system or any BKM system, BPM system, and so on. And then when we consider, and Paco posted it in the chat, he looked it up. Obsidian was indeed published March the 30th in 2020. Insane. This is, well, it is 5 years ago. And well, it feels a lot longer with all the things that happened in between.
But we received many requests about Obsidian, and also because in my
because
case,
if you consider, right, both of us, we tried to nearly 2 years to implement Obsidian. So considering it's only 5 years out, it was a big thing. So I used a long time Obsidian, things like that. The thing is, what I want to get here to, Obsidian appeared next to Notion. Until then, Notion was the holy grail, and maybe Rome Research, right? And these two things. And then suddenly Obsidian comes around, and this is now the holy grail. Now you can use plugins and build your custom personal knowledge management. And then all these subcategories came out like logseek and all these things in parallel. And this where it becomes really messy, because it's now all about subtleties, which tool to use. And if then you don't have strong understanding of your tool agnostic workflows behind, then you're getting lost with all the different options that you have out there. And what Heptabase did, they just looked at these tools and picked the things that people use most from the tools, right? Obsidian, they use the backlinking on Rome research and so on. They made the super tags somehow similar to Tana, all in a less complicated and not so fully fledged out feature, but more than enough for most of our busy professionals. And that's what makes Heptabase so powerful, using the visual connection. That was something that was always missing for me as well. When I looked at Obsidian, I wanted to see a visual connection between my nodes, and don't tell me about this orb that you can get there and see all the things. I want to make intentionally the connections on a visual board. That's what Heptabase does. You connect two cards together and they get connected. And that's something that is right now, to me, the best solution that you can have, or at least I can have for my specific use case. But this doesn't mean that next year there isn't another tool that is even better than this. And it will happen, no doubt, because it always happened in the past. And the same is for MEM, right? When Paco and I met, we were fans of MEM, the first AI note-taking tool that makes sense of all your notes and so on. And now look at this AI space and all the note-taking you can do with AI, and how small MEM became, and they crumbled. But back then, it was a hype. And that's really important to realize as well. And John came now into the chat and he posted the question that we already answered in the beginning of this of this session. John, just rewatch the recording when it goes live next week on Wednesday, and then you get your answer there. No worries.
Yes, right. Because one thing that it's important is that even if because the point is that we need to understand that the world of productivity, but also just information, is huge. If we just pay attention to the PKM, personal knowledge management area, the approach to information differs on the tool that you are using. I mean, you cannot compare the approach to information of Obsidian versus Tana, that use the outlining technique mainly, to Craft, that it's like, that to Google Docs. I don't know, too many different ways of managing information. And the thing is, first off, asking oneself and wondering, what is the approach to information that you need? Because that will help you a lot to start creating, a bucket of tools that you can compare one to each other. I can compare, for instance, Workflowy with Logseek with Tana, for instance. And I can compare, Heptabase with Obsidian and, another one that is based on long text format. But what about Craft? What is Craft? Craft is, it's like Google Doc enhanced, but they have also now put actions into it, and you can create tasks. And then it's when everything gets destroyed if you don't have crystal clear and well-defined workflows, because you are feeling, without knowing, the overlapping of the areas. That's why we created the ICOR framework as a tool that represents that overlapping areas, because it helps you, because then, again, you need to split between inner world and outer world, because it has nothing to do, an article that you found on the internet and want to store, with an idea that came to your mind at any moment. But the point is that you can store anything in most of these tools that I have previously mentioned. So there's a chaotic thing. Well, instead of enhancing the process of thinking, it's creating a huge ball of noise, that at the end you don't know where to store the information, you don't know how to retrieve it, you don't create actions out of that information, because that information is totally mess. So that's the thing. We need to start understanding all these concepts, and based on that, create workflows that we can run on autopilot to really become productive. Because if not, it's quite difficult.
The problem for those tool companies are actually the users not understanding why they're using the tool. So, like, Evernote. They had the potential, right? I don't know when it was, 2019. I was talking to Ian Small, the previous CEO of Evernote, and I told him, let's focus on tags and interconnection, because if you don't pick up on this, you will lose momentum with Evernote. And well, it happened. It happened. They went downhill. They were bought. And what do they do now? They become another all-in-one solution, adding tasks, connecting it with your calendar, and making this all-in-one workspace for you. But what they don't realize is that they always focus on the individual person who is just, a knowledge worker, maybe not a busy professional who needs to leverage this in many places, because then you cannot use the task management in these tools in order to make sense with other tools and things. Well, that goes beyond this. I think next week we should talk about PPM and BPM as much we did here, to differentiate between task management and project management. But the problem is that the users don't know what they need. They think they need everything in this one tool. And if the tool jumps onto this bandwagon and provides this, they become like the flag in the wind. They don't provide a fully fledged features. They're a bit of everything. And that's why we always worry when we see tools like Todoist now going more into the project management, because 100% people were requesting a lot of things. If you would just do this, it would just make so much more sense in my company, and I could use it for the whole company and things like that, instead of being specialized. And the speciality of these tools is key. And that's why, again, when we see Heptabase now launching collaboration, it goes outside of what we thought that Heptabase is best in, right? But it also makes, on the other hand, a lot of sense from their perspective. They catch up more people. The only worries is that they lose focus on the things. And now let's go through the chat so we can answer the questions before we end this session as well. So Darcy said, what I have come to realize while searching for a PKM, BKM, that I only need an app that can effectively store my notes, etc., and be able to query my needs effectively. Vectorization will be a must in the future if using AI. Yeah, so again, the PKM and BKM interconnectedly used. Be careful when you say that. When you say, can effectively store my notes. There are different types of notes. There are the notes that you take. There's the daily notes that you take in your meetings. But then there are crucial information that you add to relevant tasks and action that enhances the speed of completing those tasks. One example of many, like ideas. What about these? How do you store them? Do you do this in the same tool? Do you do it in a different space? These are the questions that you get answered using the ICOR methodology when you go through the ICOR journey. And Joe says, any opinion on Defter notes or a PKM for those who like handwriting? Never heard of Defter notes. Sorry.
Not me either.
But the thing is, when it comes to handwriting, obviously I covered a lot of handwriting note-taking apps in the past, and I consider them as an enhanced paper notebook. All right, if you use it on an iPad. So you just need to be aware of it. You have the advantage of searching your handwriting and things like that. But how do you bring it into the final destination or the BKM, things like this? So how do you organize this? If it works for you, great. You can digitalize your notes. You are able to search your information. But maybe you miss out on the advantages of interconnected nodes, building knowledge bases with the digital systems that we have available nowadays. And this being said, Heptabase is adding handwriting to their tool as well. And that's amazing, where I think that's much more useful for many people than adding the collaboration feature to Heptabase. So I cannot wait to see this. I saw some early, early recordings of where they show how to use handwriting in Heptabase, and that looks really promising, as it will become searchable in Heptabase and you can convert it into type text. So for me, no need to look any further. And Darcy said, you hit it on the head, Paco. We have access to so much info that if we want it all, then you need a good way of storing it to access it properly. YouTube University is a great example of great info that needs ingested properly. Exactly. And also ask yourself always, do I actually need to capture this? How do I mess up? That's why we didn't even mention inner and outer world in this conversation, because this is focusing on PKM. That's why we have methodologies and courses and things out there just talking about PKM, because that's easy. Well, and it's not so easy because it's so various, and that's why making this work with ICOR, that we look, even zoom out further and look at the whole productivity system comprehensively, and then being able to zoom into the specific area of your productivity like PKM and still be comprehensive understanding all this. That's where we are pretty proud of, that we made this methodology work this way. And very quickly, thinking about what you take in, we are using Reader, the Read Later application, together with Readwise, in order to not clutter up the main PKM system with irrelevant information. So there's even a filter before it goes into the final PKM. But again, you have to understand what you're doing there. And that's what we teach in the digital note-taking like a pro and the PKM like a pro course in the ICOR journey.
The point is how difficult it is for a VC professional to really end up with a perfect tool stack or even just one tool that works properly without having a methodology behind. Because here we see the complexity, the overlapping, the just one word that is information, and look all the things that are behind, and we have just scratched the surface. So imagine the moment that we move to personal knowledge management, time management, business knowledge management, business project management. Imagine all the things, and then put AI on top, and then you got the perfect mix to go back home and go again to a notebook. And I will try my best, because it's chaotic and also so frustrating, because just here, by seeing, we are receiving, I don't know, hundreds of questions every single day, and we see how people are suffering because they don't understand the concepts behind, and it's impossible. It's like, I don't know, if I don't know anything about motorbikes and I go and say, well, I want a motorbike, and just I go for the first one that I know, put it on my on my side, and then try my best. Well, you're gonna crash for sure, and that's what's happening. The point is that I can live without a motorbike, but not being able to work properly nowadays for a VC professionals, talking about how he deals with time, actions, information properly, well, it's dilutes the value of that VC professional just because of that, that it can be a talented person, but without a methodology behind that helps him or her understand the real meaning of each thing and how he could approach the world of productivity is impossible. Because also software companies don't help at all, because they want to grab all the users without taking care of the real value that they are delivering, and then it becomes chaotic.
Yeah, that's true. And you just mentioned something very important here. We see it over and over. The moment people grab a piece of paper and write down their task list, that's where they don't have a system that they understand and are, running on common sense. If you have a digital system, as we are using them, you don't have to think about how to use the system. You're just using it like you would go on a bike to get to the destination. You're not thinking about how to drive the bike, right? But at some point, you have to learn how to drive that bike. And the same applies to the productivity system. You have to understand these concepts and workflows behind. And that's where ICOR provides you end-to-end everything that you need to understand how to build your productivity system independently from the tools. And the same for the note-taking. People get confused with the tools. They don't know where to find it. And it's so much easier to have a paper notebook and write things down, have it in front of your face. And then you get a calm moment for a few days because you now have it in front of you. But the moment volume comes into the game, you again will end up with a lot of paper notebooks. You will start searching for information and all this. That's why, not mentioning any names, but when I see now the hybrid system approach and things like that, that's just excuses. It's just digital systems not working. That's the reason why people pick up these physical solutions again, because they want to get back into control. And there's nothing against it. Maybe it's much better in some case that you write down this list and have it next to you and you work on this. But just in just in specific use case. Maybe you're overwhelmed. Maybe you know that you need to update your system again. But in the long term, when you compete to others who have digital systems, and more people will have this thanks to the paperless movement, right? They will outperform you. So if you, an employee, if you are running a company and you trust on the dated systems, I'd say you might feel fine. Maybe everything is working for you. No need to stress yourself if you're happy with your life and with all the things. But if you hit a ceiling, if you're missing out on opportunities, if you want to free up time, or if you launch a side hustle or things like that, then this is the way to go. You have to make it work to become more efficient and therefore scale your business and your team to stay competitive. No doubt about this. And one last thing, I mean, John mentions here in the chat, does Tom have a video of how he approaches his routines for morning, organizing shallow work, afternoon outline and time block, and afternoon shallow work time in Todoist? So the thing is, as I mentioned, let's talk about this next time, Paco. PPM, which is personal project management, versus BPM, business project management. I think there we will talk about all these things that you just listed there, John, and we will make a note. We won't forget about this, and then we will cover this next Monday for sure. Interesting. Other than that, if you want to have the answer today, go through the ICOR journey. What you ask here is perfectly explained in the task management like a pro course where we talk about personal task management. All right, everyone. Great to see you guys and all the engagement. And we cannot wait to catch you up next week then. Have a good week. Bye-bye.
See you. Thank you.